Hi everyone, my name is Natalie and today I wanted to do sort of a chatty video talking about a few things that I've been thinking about related to reading and reading habits, and especially with the things I've been reading recently. So today, basically the theme of this chat is going to be enlightening or enriching your reading. So with that I mean basically all of the things that we can do, all of the things we can do to get more out of the reading that we do. So for instance, if you're reading a book and you're doing, like for example, you're looking up words that you don't understand, that's one way of engaging with the things you're reading and not just letting the unknown words pass you by. This is something I used to do quite a lot in the beginning when I was reading ebooks, especially of classics. I looked up quite a lot of words and not just ebooks but in general, because I'm not a native English speaker, so there was a lot of things, especially with older English, that I wasn't familiar with. Especially I remember this being the case with my beginning of reading Jane Austen, but there were a lot of words that I needed to look up because I was so unfamiliar with older English vocabulary. Another way is to annotate your books, to ask questions of the author or the text that you're reading, to engage with it in a more direct sense rather than being a passive reader, allowing the text just to flow you by. When you annotate, you're kind of stopping the text and stamping on it a bit before you move on. And one thing that has been sort of more related to things I've been reading recently, and that is to kind of learn about the subject through other mediums than the reading. So I recently read and finished the Walt Disney, The Triumph of the American Imagination by Neal Gabler. This is a pretty big in scope as well as in size biography of Walt Disney. When I started reading this, I was watching a lot of the Disney movies, the classics, the future films. Since I had a lot of these movies fresh in my mind, I was able to follow along a lot of the description of the processes and some of the flaws in some of the earlier works of Disney through the discussion in the book. So I think although I have watched a lot of the Disney classics before reading this book, I had watched the majority of the future films, the ones that are called classics, the animated ones. But for example, a lot of the war years movies I hadn't watched before, so I had just watched them for the first time with fresh eyes when I started reading this book and connecting the discussion and what was going on in Walt Disney's life and what was going on in the company's history was really interesting, because it allowed me to see more in the book, I think, because I had just watched those and because I was continually watching things related to the topic. I was able to sort of digest the book in a deeper sense, I think, watching movies created by the person or created by one of the persons involved, and reading the book about his life. Another thing that was sort of very recently sort of similarly on this topic was Climb the Stacks did a video talking about documentaries about literary persons, so basically writers, and she mentioned a documentary about John Didion and James Baldwin, and she taught, especially the James Baldwin one was interesting to me because I just recently read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin on her recommendation earlier in December. The Fire Next Time is basically 2 essays collected into one, and in which Baldwin discusses race and religion. She recommended a documentary called I Am Not Your Negro about James Baldwin, and I think that is something that I've been wanting to do for a while. Just read a book on a certain topic or a certain person, or by a certain person, and then watch a documentary about the topic to enrich both the reading experience and the watching experience, so that they both kind of mix together to create a fuller experience. I think I've done much of that previously, but I've definitely watched like YouTube videos on specific topics after I've read something, to experience something in multiple ways to make each experience deeper, and that is something I kind of have been thinking about for a while. I'm starting to move towards. I remember also Sophie from Portal in the Pages talked about this a while back, and I'm starting to really feel like that is the optimal way of engaging with your reading. I made a video in the autumn talking about I think I named the video Aligning Your Reading with Your Real Life, in which I talked about basically reading seasonally, and reading in preparation for something, reading about something before you're doing it, and also I think being inspired to do things in real life based on your reading. And this is sort of a continuation on that topic, I guess, because for example, one of the things I mentioned in that video was bird watching, and I had read a book called Corvus. It was basically about the Corvus family of birds, the crows, ravens, etc. But there were a lot of other birds in that book as well. And reading that book made me want to study animals, and especially birds, closer. So I went out and got myself like binoculars, and bought a like a guidebook for bird species, and then went out to sit out in nature and just watch birds, and it was such a lovely experience. Bird watching experience was so soothing that even though I've not really been going outside often and bird watching just for the bird watching sake, I've just been more aware of the bird species living around my area for the last couple of months, and just watching a bird like through the window, or when I'm out walking the dog, my day can just instantly be improved by just watching and listening to the song of the bird. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I guess I just feel like I have started to appreciate the birds around me because of reading that book. So in that sense, I think reading enriched my life rather than the opposite. That was sort of the beginning of this thought processes, and then I moved on to where I'm at right now, where I am trying to enrich in my reading rather than enriching my life through reading. And yeah, I think that was basically it. The annotating and the watching documentaries, and even if you are capable going to museums, watching collections on a certain topic, or going to specific places related to the book. Like for example, there is a book coming out that I mentioned in the previous video about building engineering, architecture, and it is written by the female engineer behind the Shard, which is a building in England, I think. And like for example, reading that book and then going to see the building would be a way to engage with it in a way that I think you would probably benefit from just having that kind of background information, even though it's obviously not necessary. I think it is a nice way to make your reading more living. I hope you enjoyed my rambly thoughts, and if you have any thoughts on your own on this topic, like doing things to enrich in your reading in any way. It doesn't have to be annotating and watching documentaries and movies, but I think it's probably one of the easier ways. But if you have any other thoughts, do feel free to share. I would love to hear your thoughts about this very rambly and unspecific topic. I hope you're having a really good day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.